Yeah, plenty to talk about today, no doubt about it. All right, well, let's start out before we go to Peter McIlvaine in Great Britain. Let's go to our buddy Bill Federer. We were going to be joined by his son, but I think now that's not going to happen. So we just got Bill. So we'll have to just settle for you, Bill. Bill, welcome back. Glad you're with us.
Hey, great to be with you, Brandon.
Great to have you with us. All right. Hey, do you know that the clip that we did the other day on Islam has now had well over 1 million views?
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Isn't it interesting? Logan and I ask the guys in the control room often, Logan and the guys, what is the content that gets the most clicks? And they told me a few months ago, anything you do in Islam, right up top. Isn't that funny how we've been talking about Islam for so many decades, but now all of a sudden people want to hear more about it? And yet, Usama Dakdok and Shahram Hadian will tell you how it's absolute crickets when it comes to invitations from churches.
Right. It is a phenomenon where, came out with the book, What Every American Needs to Know About the Quran, in 2007. And almost for a decade, I crisscrossed the country speaking on Islam with the gentleman that you mentioned and several others, and trying to wake the country up. And churches, as you mentioned, would shy away from the topic because they felt awkward and whatever the reason was. And as a result, we've seen it's almost prophetic what's happened with them coming in. There, an interview I did on CTN, Christian Television Network, with Herman and Sharon Bailey. I don't know if you remember them, but
wait, they're the ones down in Florida?
Yeah. No, they've retired. They're still good friends. I keep in touch with them.
Remind me of their name again.
Herman and Sharon Bailey.
Herman and Sharon Bailey. I wish we could go back and get some of the old archives. Logan, write that down, will you? Herman and Sharon Bailey. Maybe get their contact info from Bill. I'd love to get some of their footage, if they still have their archive footage, because I was on their program in the early 90s, Logan. And that's one of the archives we should probably go back and get. If I remember correctly, they're in like Tampa, Florida or somewhere, right?
Yeah, correct. Clearwater, at the CTN headquarters. And
Yep. I was on their show a few times. And if I remember correctly, Herman, he had a car collection.
Yeah. He was a successful businessman before he got into doing church work. And then he helped at a church and grew it into a very large church. And then he began doing programs with CTN. And
I remember them.
Was on for decades, probably 30 years.
Yeah, they were. Yes. Wow. Bring that back to my memory. Wow. Yeah.
But he interviewed me on Islam, and somebody found a little clip, and it's gone viral as well. But I think people are waking up to this infiltration. And of course, for those not familiar, in my book, I document how Muhammad's life is the blueprint. He's the DNA. So he was born in the year 570 AD, and he was illiterate. He could never read and write. The word Quran means recitation. It's an oral thing. His mother dies before he's born. His mother dies when he's 6. His grandfather and guardian dies when he's 8. He's orphaned, taken in by an uncle, Abu Talib, who's a merchant who takes him on camel rides. And he goes to different cities and hears about the different religions. There was a Manichaeism religion. A guy named Mani combined little pieces of other religions. From his point of view, he was extracting the truth out of them, and he would put them together. And so a follower of Mani was St. Augustine. Before he met the guy, realized he didn't know what he was talking about, rejected it, spent the rest of his life debunking Manichaeism. But Muhammad heard about this guy, and so and then he goes to Persia and hears about the Zoroastrian faith that believed that paradise was filled full of virgins that would fulfill all the guy's desires. And that found its way into his belief system. And the Zoroastrians believed in jinns or genies, like, 1001 Arabian Nights, Aladdin's lamp, and then pagan cities. And so Mecca had a square building called the Kaaba, and it housed 360 different pagan gods. and the most popular was Hubal, the moon god. And the calendar began with the first sight of the crescent moon over the desert, and so this got incorporated into his belief system. And the pagans would kiss the rock and walk around it and bow to it, and then Jewish cities. And he originally had his followers bowing toward Jerusalem, but when the Jews rejected him, then he changed it toward Mecca. And then even Encyclopedia Britannica says the gospel was made known to Muhammad through apocryphal and heretical sources. So Muhammad thought the Trinity was the Father, Mary, and Jesus. Nobody ever explained to him the Holy Spirit. And apocryphal, what's that? Well, there's the infancy gospel of Thomas, written several centuries after Jesus by someone who knew nothing of Jewish life. It's so filled full of errors and inconsistencies that nobody takes it serious. But those stories were floating around the desert. Muhammad heard them, and now they're in the Quran and in Islam and taken as fact. Like Jesus made clay birds and clapped and they flew away, and raised a playmate from the dead, and so forth. And so he has all these elements, and he goes into, he marries his, he was 25 years old, and he married a wealthy widow named Khadijah. She's 40 years old, and so he goes out to a cave and prays. This is what Christians were doing at the time. It was called pietism. This movement that said if you really become a Christian, you should give away your money and live in a cave as a hermit or so forth. And so he's in a cave. A spirit appears to him, according to the Hadith, squeezes him, commands him to read. He said he cannot read, and it happened the second time, third time, and then it sat on him, and he began to recite, and that's how the Quran came to him. And he went to his wife Khadijah, told her he thought he was demon possessed, and she decides to test the spirit by removing some of her veils and robes. And after she removed enough of it, he said he couldn't see the spirit anymore. And she said, well, it must have been from God, because it was embarrassed to look upon me without all my veils and so forth on. That was the test. Now, those that know the scripture, the test is every spirit that does not acknowledge Jesus as the Christ is of Antichrist. She takes Muhammad to her cousin, who's an Ebionite Christian priest. Ebionism is this heresy that said Jesus was a created being. And so he said maybe that was the spirit that appeared to Moses, and then he dies. And so Muhammad's left with his spirit. He goes into Mecca and presents his faith, and nobody's excited about it. And so he gets confrontational. And they decide he's a disturber of the peace, and they chase him out. First in 619 AD, he tries going to a city called Al-Taif. They don't want him. They pelt him with rocks and stones, chase him out of town. And then his wife dies. It's this year of sorrows. And then he goes to a Jewish city called Medina, or Yatrib, Medina. But there's 3 Jewish clans. They don't get along, but they let Muhammad in as a Muslim immigrant, the first ever Muslim immigrant. And he goes into the minority neighborhoods, and he begins to organize a following, sort of like a community organizer. And when his following gets large enough, he gets involved in politics. And then he and his followers pressure the Jews to accommodate them politically. And they do. They make a treaty. Now Muhammad's a political leader. And then Muhammad's followers are chased out of Mecca for disturbing the peace, and he allows them to rob the caravans headed back to Mecca in retaliation. So where Jesus said, if they take your coat, give them your shirt, Muhammad's attitude was, if they take your house, you retaliate, take their caravan. So he gets verses from his Allah that he gets a fifth of the booty from robbing caravans. One verse says, Allah has given you the slave girls as your booty. And so the Meccans in 624 AD, the Battle of Badra, they send 1,000 soldiers to escort their caravan. Muhammad with 300 defeats 1,000. And so now he's convinced he's supposed to be a military leader. He fights in 66 battles and raids in the next 8 years before he dies, killing an estimated 3,000 people. The Meccans send 10,000 soldiers to Medina to stop Muhammad. And the Battle of the Trench, 627 AD, he digs potholes and trenches all around the city, which renders the superior cavalry of the Meccans useless. You can't charge your horse and camel across a field full of potholes. They'll break their legs. And so it throws off the battle strategy. Muhammad goes to some of the Meccans at night, bribes them, they slip away. Goes to some others at night, threatens them, and they slip away, sort of the bribe or the bullet. Gets freezing cold for a week, and the rest of the Meccans lose heart and retreat. And Muhammad considers this a great victory, that his enemies were cowards. And so in Islam, there's a concept, when your enemy is strong, retreat. When your enemy is weak, attack. He goes back into the Jewish city of Medina and gets offended at one of the Jewish clans, confiscates their property, chases them out of town. And the other 2 Jewish clans sort of keep their heads low and think, well, at least he's not picking on us. And then he picks on the lesser of the last two and confiscates the property, chases them out of town. And the big Jewish tribe says, well, at least he's not focusing on me. And that tribe was competition. And now there's one Jewish tribe. And Muhammad, according to the Hadith, is taking a bath, and a spirit appears to him and says, how can you rest when all his enemies are in your midst? Points at the last Jewish neighborhood and surrounds him for 28 days, brings him into the market, chops off the heads of the men, sells the women and children into slavery. And so within 5 years of Muhammad coming as an immigrant into the Jewish city of Medina, there is not a Jew left in the city of Medina. They were chased out, killed, or enslaved. Within 50 years of Muhammad's death, every pre-existing culture in Arabia was wiped out. And they'd have their horses, and they would ride up to some Bedouin nomads, and they'd always pick on ones that were smaller than their group. And they said, if you join our group, you get women, you get 4 wives, plus as many extra women as your right hand possesses. And if you die, you get lots of women. And if you don't join right now, we'll kill you, and we'll take your wives and daughters and divide them up. And they would say, okay, we'll join. And then they say, okay, fine, get your swords, follow us to the next one, the next one, the next one. It kept growing. And so they conquered all of Arabia. And then Jerusalem, they conquered 638 AD. It used to be a Byzantine Christian city. Then they conquered Syria, 648, Caliph Umar. Syria was the first country that was completely Christian. Until it was conquered. The name Christian was first used in Syria until the Muslims conquered it. Then they conquered into Armenia and then Egypt. You had the Coptic Christians from Constantinople were persecuting the Byzantine Christians, and they got upset at each other, and it has a religious dispute. Well, the Muslims come into Egypt and offer to chase out the Byzantine Christians, and the Coptic Egyptians says, fine. Well, once they drive them out, they take over. Matter of fact, they cut out the tongues of anybody caught speaking Coptic. That's how they eradicated an entire national language and brought in Arabic from Arabia. And then they conquered North Africa. People forget there used to be 250 Catholic dioceses along North Africa. But the Christians had withdrawn. They got into that pietism, their version of separation of church, and say, well, if you're really spiritual, you won't be involved defending your city. And then, when he came into Egypt, which was Christian since evangelized by Mark, wrote the gospel, he picked on one of the two Christian groups. If he would have said that he'd conquer them all, they would have made up with each other. If he would have gone into Medina and told these 3 Jewish clans, in 5 years there won't be a Jew left, they'd have made up with each other. But then in the year 711, 80,000 Muslims invade Spain. And Spain was a bunch of Visigothic Christian kingdoms that didn't get along. And you had a Muslim leader named Tariq, and he lands at a mountain, which is called Jabal. So they call it Jabal Tariq, the mountain of Tariq, or Gibraltar, the Rock of Gibraltar. And so 70,000 Muslims come across, and in 10 years, they conquer all of Spain. How? Because they would pick on one kingdom, and the other ones wouldn't come to the rescue. Then they pick on another kingdom, and another one. And if he would have said in 10 years, I'm going to conquer it all, they'd have made up with each other. And so the pattern, and then finally they conquer southern France, and they're stopped outside of Paris at the Battle of Tours in 732 AD, just 100 years after the death of Muhammad in 632 AD. They go from Arabia to Paris in a 100-year military campaign. And they did it by playing the different parties against each other. So it's like a pinball machine. They'll use one party and then they'll use another party. And so when they come in, they'll be happy to work with the Democrats or the Republicans, whichever one will advance their agenda. And so the pattern is 3 steps: immigrate, increase, eliminate. Immigrate as a religious refugee into a host country and take advantage of their tolerance, and then go into the minority neighborhoods and get a following, and be like a political community organizer. When the following gets big enough, then you get involved in politics. And then you have random outbreaks of violence and stabbings, and the previous inhabitants of the neighborhood no longer feel safe, and they move out, and they've taken over the neighborhood, and another neighborhood, and another, and so until they take over the whole country. It's sort of like in nature, you have domestic species and invasive species. And so you have ideologies. Christianity is more of a domestic ideology. Love your neighbor, turn the cheek, and do unto others as you are them doing to you. And Islam is more of an invasive species. Wherever they come in, they eventually take over. But the 3 steps is immigrate, increase, eliminate. Immigrate as a religious refugee. Increase the number of your followers and begin to get involved in politics. And then you intentionally have random outbreaks of violence by the young Muslim men. And the older ones will pretend like they didn't know about it. And then no Muslim family will testify against another Muslim family on behalf of a kafir infidel. And then they do the calls to prayer, which makes the previous inhabitants of the neighborhood really feel like their neighborhood is no longer theirs. And then they finally move out and then they take over. So this is a pattern that's been successful in Europe, especially because the Europeans are having like maybe 1 kid per family. And I've talked to people and researched, and Muslim immigrants will come in and will have multiple wives. They can have up to 4 wives, and they'll tell the wife to go down to the welfare office and say the husband's not around because it's okay to lie to infidels. And then the husband will put his wife in 4 different apartments or houses. And then as he visits the wives, the welfare checks get bigger because there's more kids. And he's living like a prince with his harem, and it's all paid for by the West. And they were interviewing Joram Choudary, founder of Islam for UK, and the interviewer said, "Don't you feel bad that you're living off the English people while your stated goal is to take over?" And he said, "Allah allows us to live off the infidel while we are subduing them." Very parasitic, right? You suck the blood until you kill the host victim. And so we see, and it's not just the Christian West. They did it in India, right? The Hindus were so into tolerance. They're just tolerating everybody. And when Islam came in, they go, "Oh, another religion, fine. Yeah, the water's warm, jump in, you're right." The Hindus could not conceive of an exclusive religion. It's just our way. Yeah, fine. Yeah, you'll be fine. Just come on in. And some of the original Muslims when came into India, the Hindus actually helped them to build their mosques, not realizing that later they would tear down their Hindu temples and build mosques. And so the left in America is so into wokeness, is so into tolerate everything, and let's separate ourselves from their Judeo-Christian path, that it's like tolerate this, tolerate any kind of sexual behavior, tolerate Muslims, not realizing that you could be tolerating a group that actually wants to eradicate you. And so anyway, that's all in a book. It's called What Every American Needs to Know About the Quran, A History of Islam in the United States. And it was published in 2007, the first time. And now it's seeing a sudden resurgence in sales after the election of Mondami in New York.
Wow, fascinating. And I think we found a video clip, do we not, Logan? Here, watch this, Bill. Here we go.
Which 3 steps was immigrate, increase, eliminate. Immigrate as a religious refugee, increase the number of your followers and demand political accommodation, and then eliminate the previous culture. So I was speaking in Detroit area, and afterwards had people come up and visit around the book table, and they were telling me about a lady who had a ministry to pregnant mothers. So she shows up at a Muslim house, has a little present. Well, out of a bedroom comes another pregnant Muslim mom. Out of a bedroom comes another pregnant Muslim mom. Out of a bedroom comes another pregnant Muslim mom, all pregnant by the same man. He's practicing Sharia law in his house. And then someone else says, "Oh yeah, Fazil bought a bunch of houses on the street, has a wife in each one."
Where was this?
In Detroit area. The wives go down to the welfare office and say their husband's not around. He goes and visits them, and the more kids they have, the larger the checks get. And he's living like a king at state expense, and all the kids playing in the middle of the street are his children. He's practicing Sharia law on his block. They take over several more blocks, and they vote in the school board. And now they have their Sharia in the schools. And then they take over more blocks. They vote in the police department, fire department. And in Hamtramck, Detroit, they vote in the majority of the city council. They have their minarets, their calls to prayer 5 times a day, no different than Pakistan. So we see the first ones come in as immigrants, and they're nice, and they're so nice. Everybody says they're nice, nothing to fear, let more in, more come in. They gravitate together, form a community. Imam shows up and says, "Okay, you need to start getting a little more serious about this, more fundamental. Then the burqas start appearing. People say the neighborhood's changing. They move out. More Muslims move in. And then there's always that stickler that says, I refuse to move out. And that's when there's random violence from Muslim youth. And there's no witnesses, because no Muslim family dare testify against another Muslim family on behalf of some kafir infidel that's hanging in the neighborhood. And so eventually they take over the entire neighborhood. And they do this neighborhood by neighborhood, city by city, block by block, until they take over countries. And there's 1,400 years of track record to observe this pattern. So they took over Egypt, which used to be Coptic Christian. They took over Syria, which used to be Christian. They took over all of Turkey, which used to be Christian. Took over all of North Africa, which used to be. They took Spain, held it for 700 years until the Spaniards drove them out.
Fascinating. Good job.
Yeah, that was 15 years ago. You can tell that.
15 years ago.
I've been saying the same thing, trying to get people's attention.
Yep, trying to wake them up. And if we don't wake them up, we're in big trouble. Look at what's happening in the UK. And they're putting in all kinds of World Economic Forum, UN type laws in the UK now that are, I guess I have a report on our website today that I guess Substack is caving to all these censorship laws in the UK. But try explaining to, in my opinion, morons like Piers Morgan. Listen to what happened between Piers Morgan and Tommy Robinson recently. Here we go. Apparently they can't deal with facts.
Saying that the problem is with Islam. Are you accepting that you're Islamophobic?
Because there are 100 verses in this.
Yes or no? Okay. Are you Islamophobic?
There's no such word as Islamophobia. Phobia is an irrational fear. It's not irrational to fear these things. Now, if I hold this book up and say there will never be peace on this earth so long as we have this book, is a violent and cursed book. That's
Can
I tell you who said that? Can I tell you who said that? Sir William Gladstone.
Right, you wouldn't do that with
Sir William Gladstone.
Would you do that with the Bible? Show some respect.
Show some respect.
Show some respect.
Have you read this book?
For people.
Have you read this book?
There are over a billion people.
There are 100 verses in this book that incite violence and murder against us.
Show some damn respect for people's religious beliefs, right?
I should show some respect for a book that incites murder against me.
Put it down.
And calls me an animal. No, I won't put it down. Sir William Gladstone held this book above his head in Parliament, and he said there will never be peace on this earth so long as we have this book. It's a violent and cursed book. Was Sir William Gladstone, who we have statues across our capital C, was he a bigot or an Islamophobe?
See, now
Winston Churchill.
Sounding like a complete
Winston
lunatic.
Churchill. No, I'm quoting some of the best leaders in this country.
You're sounding like a bigoted lunatic.
No, I'm not.
Somebody that basically, you are an Islamophobe who hates Islam.
No, I don't.
You basically think all Muslims are to blame. We've seen you on video saying it. And what you're doing now is deliberately inflammatory. It is deliberately poisonous.
How is this inflammatory?
And you are having the complete opposite effect to the one that you say you have.
William Gladstone.
You are stirring up hatred. You are abusing people's religion. You're abusing their faith. And you're being a complete disgrace.
What do you know about the Prophet Muhammad? We've established nothing. You are ignorant.
I know that you're deliberately insulting.
What do you know about the Prophet? How am I insulting people?
Who have deeply held religious beliefs.
And
you flouncing the Quran around in your hand in that disgraceful manner is outrageous.
This book is the reason we're in such a mess. No. That's a reality.
No, we're in this mess because people take Islam, they are terrorists, and they abuse the nature of Islam and the wording of Islam, and they perpetrate evil, and it is completely wrong. For you to try and claim that the vast majority of Muslims who are decent, law-abiding people, to try to abuse and mock their faith and their holy book is an outrage.
Their holy book. When you talk, okay, so when the sacred months are passed, slay the non-Muslims wherever you find them and take them captive and besiege them and prepare for them in ambush. Who's slaying who? I'm not inciting hatred. This calls for my death.
There you go. Piers Morgan, in my opinion, is a complete moron. I guess that was from like 2017, 2018. He says you're slamming their deeply held religious beliefs. You mean ones like taking a child bride at 6, consummating at 9? I mean, pedophilia, is that now a deeply held religious belief that we cannot criticize? Otherwise, we're criticizing people's holy religion. Bill?
Yeah. It's clear that they didn't let him answer, and they want to stay on the air. If Piers Morgan and whoever the other person was were to not try to push back, they would have been taken off the air because of what's happening in England. I talked to several people. One of them was from England, and he said how they he cannot go back because of censorship laws. And I said, what? He goes, yeah, 16,000 people are in prison today in England, some for as little as liking a post. And so I went online, and sure enough, the New York Post talks about 30 people a day are arrested in England, some for retweets. I just read yesterday, a lady was beat up. She was in her own apartment. She was taking a bath, and she had texted her friend that the person that beat her up, and she used a slur. The next thing she knows, 11 police officers bust into her house while she's in her tub and arrest her for hateful communications. This is England? And then you have a member of parliament in Finland, and she is facing Supreme Court cases over a Bible tweet, and they're doing the same thing in Germany. They're using all of the tech, all of the AI, and these are private tweets. So the lady in Finland, she had texted her pastor, and that private communication then landed her 3 times before the Supreme Court in Finland. And then Germany's doing the same. All of the European Union's doing the same. One of the trends you see is drive neutral reverse. You go from a Judeo-Christian past into a secular, free sex, transgendered, anything goes present into an Islamic future. And so you look at Europe, it went from 1,000 years of Catholic cathedrals, Protestant Reformation, and then Jewish neighborhoods to a secular Europe beginning with the French Revolution. All right, free sex, anything goes, and it's sort of epitomized in John Lennon's song, Imagine, right? Imagine there's no heaven and no religion too. It's like, okay, you've gotten rid of the Judeo-Christian religion. So into Europe comes these immigrants, and they have lots of kids, and the Europeans are having few kids. So they say that by 2030, there will be a majority Muslim population in Europe, and they'll just flat out vote in Sharia law. And it won't just be no-go zones where they take over entire neighborhoods in Paris or around Belgium and London. No, they'll take over entire cities. And people forget, Egypt was completely Christian for 6 centuries. It's not anymore. All of North Africa was completely Christian for 6 centuries. It's not anymore. All of Turkey, all 7 churches mentioned in the book of Revelation were all in Turkey. And they were all taken over by the Muslim Turks. Constantinople was the largest Christian city in the world, and the largest Christian church in the world for hundreds of years was the Hagia Sophia, and it got turned into a mosque, and so they want to do the same thing with the Vatican. And recently they allowed Muslim prayers in the Vatican, so we see that's headed in that direction.
Wow.
And the tremendous number of burning of churches in Europe.
And if you talk about this,
Islamic immigration.
Apparently it's hate speech. Look at this. EU hands $120 million fine to Elon Musk X for breaking social media rules. The European Commission highlighted breaches using X's policy of allowing anyone to buy a verified blue check mark. And we have another one here that relates to what is it? Substack. Substack caves into the UK censorship regime and restricts UK users. I don't know what kind of time schedule you're on. Do you have a few more minutes, Bill?
Sure. Yeah.
Let me bring in our buddy. How you doing, Dolly, this morning? Can we bring him in? We're gonna let him in the meeting. I know. I've got a muffin. I got a blueberry muffin on my desk, and that's very intriguing to you, isn't it? Right? It's gluten-free, and blueberries are very good. You have blueberries every day. You eat them raw. You like them in the muffin too, don't you? You can have a piece, but you're not going to leave me alone, are you? All right. There you go, sweetheart. How can you resist that? Look at that, right? How can you resist that? We got our buddy Peter McIlvaina. Peter McIlvaina is going to join us from the UK and tell us about some of these things that are going on. Let's see. Okay, we're going to get him framed. We're going to frame Peter McIlvaina. Wow, that sounds like criminal behavior, Logan. We got to get him framed up in the camera shot. But boy, every day I have videos I can play out of the UK. Bill's already mentioned one. I saw that yesterday where the lady was assaulted by someone and text someone what she thought of the person, and boom, next thing you know, she's getting arrested. I'm pretty sure, Logan, if we were in the UK, you and I would have been arrested a long time ago. Aren't you glad we beat them in the Revolutionary War, folks? But they're trying to shove us up underneath Europe. They're trying to go for a Eurocentric world government and shove us right up underneath Europe. Here's another clip out of the UK, and then we're going to go to Peter. Watch this. Watch and listen to this. Here we go.
You're allowed to do anywhere.
No, miss, you're not allowed to sing church songs outside of church grounds, by the way.
You're not allowed to sing church songs outside
of church songs or church grounds. That's fine. That's
you're not allowed. She just said you're not allowed to sing church songs outside of church.
Our church outside of church grounds, unless you have unless you've been authorized by the church to do this kind of song.
Yeah, he's not saying anything anymore.
Are you saying that you don't care about the Human Rights Act? You're lost?
Wow, look at that little Muppet. And of course, I would be arrested for calling that creature a Muppet. Let's see, you can't sing hymns outside the church walls, but I bet you can blast that satanic call to prayer for the satanic, demonic, pedophile religion of Islam. Can you not, Peter?
You can have the call to prayer, and the call to prayer is on a local side. So it's the local authority that allows that. And Brandon, we have seen huge parts of the Midlands and north of England. You go up to Yorkshire, you kind of think traditional English towns, you think a church on every corner, church bells ringing. That's kind of the feeling you get going back generations. And yet if you go up to those areas up in Yorkshire, up in the Midlands, you have a mosque on every corner. And I remember 15 years ago, I remember going up to one of those cities and being utterly confused and dumbfounded because literally I didn't know any of the area. None of the shops were in English. There were mosques nearly on every corner. The women were covered head to foot. And it was a different society. I got in a car from London. I drove up there, came out of the car and thought, where am I? Checking my pockets. Have I forgotten my passport? Have I flown somewhere? Have I been transported somewhere foreign? And the foreign place was 7th century Arabia, which is where we find ourselves in lots of parts of the UK. And it is how it links with you, Brannon, in the US is as a warning to what happens whenever you abandon your culture, you abandon your society, you abandon the values that you hold dear. And both our nations have been built on biblical values, have been built on Christian virtues, and that has affected our institutions, whether it's health, whether it's education, in many parts of society. And yet that has been eroded as we've seen the collapse of the Church of England, which has become an apostate church. And into that vacuum goes not nothing, but something. And Islam has stepped into that vacuum as a ideology that puts forward confidence, supremacy, demands, and that is in contrast to often the Christianity we are often seen, not everywhere, there's some fantastic churches, but we are often seen in the public sphere, Christianity that is confused, that is devoid of confidence, that has no anchor, that doesn't know what it believes, and makes a virtue out of doubt instead of putting forward truth. And when you take away Christ as absolute truth, then you get absolute chaos. And that is what we are seeing in the UK. How's that for an opener, Brian?
Wow, powerful. Now, how is it you haven't been arrested, Peter?
But God. That is, I was on with Glenn Beck yesterday talking to him, and I was going through this and saying the only two words I have, which are the greatest two words in the English language, are but God. And we are all in different places. We'd all be in different situations, worse situations, but God. And God holds us. God keeps us for a purpose and for a plan. And if he chooses for us to go in a certain area, then hey, that's where we go. Who are we to reject that? And that is not to big up ourselves. That is simply because we are here to submit to the lordship of Christ. And that is my only way, because we don't have a First Amendment, Brandon. We don't have a Second Amendment. We don't have anything to back us up. We have the courts in utter disarray. I am working through a legal case with one of the grooming gang survivors, the Muslim rape gangs that we have had in the UK. And we have had a judge's award of $500,000 for the survivor. We are now waiting, I think it's now 14 months since the last court case for us to get another court time to approve the judge's ruling of 2.5 years ago that the girl should get $500,000. But our courts are in utter disarray. I've talked to other legal experts and they said they're waiting 3 years. So our system doesn't work. It's utterly collapsed. And of course, when you have that chaos, you have evil that rises up and sets itself. And that's what we are seeing in the UK.
So do you live kind of like we did under the Biden regime, where you expect the FBI to kick your door down any day? That's how we lived for 4 years. Do you live like that in the UK, where you are aware of the things that you're saying, the interviews you're giving, the programs you're coming on, and that you could get a knock at the door at any point and be arrested?
Well, I am in my inner city flat in Londonistan, as Melanie Phillips coined it. That was, goodness, 15 years ago. And it comes true. It becomes more true every single day. So I am here in a flat in the middle of London, talking to you, Brannon, across the pond, discussing what is happening. And it is God that has our back. It is him that provides our protection. It is him that closes eyes or opens eyes whenever he so wishes. So I am here from the UK, and I know that many articles I look at, Brannon, I can only access them through a VPN. It is like the China firewall that we face here in the UK, but it is a new socialist firewall, a red-green axis firewall that we face in the UK that blocks you access to all different. And we've had many organizations that have pulled on restricted access to the UK and the European Union because it is not worth it. I think today, X, just hours before we talked, I think they've had a huge fine. So I haven't delved into that because I've been looking at other areas, but this is ongoing. It does not end. And thank God for JD Vance that's commented on this. Thank God for Elon Musk has commented on this. Thank God for the Trump administration. And I saw questions being asked of different Trump spokespeople, and they're addressing this. I saw Laura Loomer yesterday talked about these kind of areas with, I think Kingsley was there for the Department of Defense or the Ministry of Defense, whatever you call it. And she was talking about some of these areas. And there is a lot of awareness of what is happening. And I think that is what we should be grateful for, that this is not happening under the radar, but there is a bright light that's being shown on this because of what President Trump has done with the administration and given many of those heads of department free rein and the ability to call out evil as they see it.
You Substack caves into the UK censorship regime and restricts UK users. Can you get to World YouTube, or is that blocked?
I use my VPN for different things. I can still access, but we can work on getting you banned on the UK, Brandon. Don't worry, we can work on that.
Well, let's get banned. Now, what we need to do is send all this Islamic trash and garbage out of here and import good Europeans, good Britons like yourself. I mean, why don't you? We need folks like you here in America, not the Islamic trash. I think Donald Trump is right. It's time to take the trash out. And I'm going to go with what the president says: remove the garbage from the country, this Islamic Somalian garbage, and let's let real persecuted people like yourself come and live here. I mean, we'd love to have you come and live in the Mid-South by us and share a studio with you and let you come in and broadcast. I mean, we need people like you who are being persecuted and arrested, folks over there, to come here, not this Islamic garbage. And by the way, let me just say, Bill, I don't know about you, but I was so happy to see that Donald Trump back, right? Now, he needs to not say Somalian garbage. He needs to go specifically to the Islamic Somalian garbage, right?
Yeah, well, Deuteronomy 28 gives the blueprint. It says, if a nation hearkens to the voice of the Lord, they'll be the head, not the tail, above and not beneath. Blessed coming in, blessed coming out. If a nation does not hearken to the voice of the Lord, the stranger will come in amongst them and rise up above them, and they will be the head and you'll be the tail. They'll be above and you'll be beneath. They'll lend to you and you'll have to borrow from them. So how did God judge his ancient people? He would let the stranger come in, the Amalekite, the Hittite, the Moabite, the termite, mosquito bite, the parasite, right? All the ites. They would come in and oppress the children of Israel. And then the children of Israel would repent, and God would raise up a deliverer and drive them out, and they would renew their covenant for about 40 years, and then they would backslide and sin again, and God would let another nation come in and oppress them. So how dead and dying things attract devourers. A dead dog on the side of the road is going to attract buzzards.
What?
We
don't like to talk about dead dogs here. Dolly doesn't like talking about dead dogs, now do you, Dolly? But
all right, we'll skip it. A dead rabbit, a dead
By the way,
squirrel.
you're all fuzzy. You went all fuzzy on us there. You're all out of focus. I don't know what happened.
Somebody tried calling in.
Now you're back. Now you're back.
Somebody tried calling in on my phone.
Again.
And
now you're out of focus again. Tell them to stop calling. I need to figure out how to block my calls. While you got that, while you get that fixed, let me go to another article, another thing here, real quick. Let's see here. This is, of course, they're implementing. It seems like the Great Reset over there in the UK. Now listen to this, gentlemen. Here's another one. Here we go. Oh, let me unmute it. There we go.
Thing the government has done to date, and it's a pretty high bar. The government is going to scrap the right to trial by jury. That's a right that dates back to the Magna Carta 800 years ago. The right to a trial by jury is an important bulwark of English liberty, but it's a particularly important safeguard of the right to free speech. We've done some research at the Free Speech Union and found that when it comes to speech offences, people are much more likely to be acquitted, to be found not guilty by juries than they are by magistrates or judges. One particular case in point is Jamie Michael, former Royal Marine, accused of stirring up racial hatred because of a 12-minute video he'd posted on Facebook encouraging people to protest against illegal immigration. It was a ludicrous charge, but nevertheless he was prosecuted. There was a jury trial. He pleaded not guilty. It took that jury all of 17 minutes to unanimously acquit him. Had it just been a judge, I'm not sure he would have been acquitted. If you care about the right to trial by jury, if you care about free speech, go to our website, sign our petition. You can either click on the link below, the link in our bio, or go to www.saveourjuries.co.uk.
Wow. So, Keir Starmer, another complete moron, Romans 1 fool, stupid, dumb as a box of rocks. I invite him to come on my show live, so it can't be edited, so we can show the world what a complete moron, fool, lowest common denominator of human trash and garbage. He's down there with them. He is stupid, okay? I invite Emmanuel Macron. You also come on my show live. You guys won't. You're cowards because you know if you came on a show like this, unedited live, it would be revealed that you are as dumb as mud, okay? You're as dumb and stupid as mud. And isn't it interesting that these leaders all over the world are just the stupidest people? And I'm not being sarcastic. They are dumb. I've studied them. I've watched them. I've listened to them. And so have many of you. The power elite deliberately, I believe, pick compromised, but also stupid people because they're easily controlled. Keir Starmer, you can look at him. He has stupid written all over his face. The eyes are the window of the soul, and you can see that he's a soulless piece of human trash. Keir Starmer. And he's a wannabe dictator. That's right. That's what I believe. And now he's going to suspend jury trials over there. I mean, you heard the guy. Why are they doing that? Because if you go before a jury, the jury's like, in 17 minutes, I'm sorry, we're for free speech, not guilty. But you put them in front of a pervert magistrate, and you have to wonder what they have on those magistrates. You wonder what they have on those magistrates, right, to control them. Wonder what clubs or islands maybe some of them have been to, huh? Good question. But the reason they want to get rid of jury trials is because the average person in the UK doesn't want to go down this road. But apparently they can control the magistrates. Again, I don't know how much of this you can comment on, Peter, because I don't want to get you in trouble.
Let me jump into some of that. So the person you brought up initially was Lord Toby Young. I was speaking at an event with him and Ezra Levant 6 weeks ago in the House of Lords, and he has set up the Free Speech Union, set that up in February 2020. They now have 75 requests a week for help. That is, they fought 5,000 cases since February 2020. He is a Conservative peer. He's one of the few good Conservatives. He is a champion. Most of them are Conservative in name only. Toby is an actual Conservative. He set up many schools that would teach Conservative principles. He has championed free speech. He set up the Free Speech Union as the only body that stands by individuals who actually have been arrested. And my guest tomorrow, Bernice Bufforth, she was actually arrested 2 years ago, 18 months ago, because of tweets she had put out. And it was the Free Speech Union that got involved. She was found not guilty, but of course she didn't do anything wrong. But it is Toby Young, and he has set up this as the only legal entity to protect individuals on free speech. He is our First Amendment. Maybe we'll get a Second Amendment. I'll leave that up to the US to maybe help us with the Second Amendment. But he is our free speech advocate or protector. And he is the only one that we have legally. I'm a member of the Free Speech Union. It's like $10 a month or something. And I know many people in the UK are. So that is the work that he has done. And the second part, just touching on the jury-free trials, that is something that's been in the Magna Carta since 1215, the right for you to be tried by your peers. And I have never sat on a jury. I have been invited. I have sat in a room for like 4 or 5 hours to wait to see if I was needed. I wasn't needed. But that is something that every British citizen is available to be called upon. And it means that you're tried by 12 independent individuals. You're not on the payroll of the government. You're not being given a job as a judge. You're not on that greasy pool of stardom as a judge, being told, you know, if you rule rightly on these cases, you may get a higher position. No, they're just random individual people. That seems to be the best way to judge. And yet we have David Lammy, the Justice Secretary, probably even worse than Keir Starmer, probably even lower. So that's showing where we are in British politics. But he has said, because of the backlog of cases, because it takes 3 years for cases now to go to courts, we're going to scrap jury trials. The thing is, that is not going to speed up. Only about 10%, 12% of our trials are jury trials because it's our lower level offences, not for serious offences. So that is not going to make a dent in the backlog we have. So it is simply destruction of British society. It is simply trying to rip the heart out of British culture and what makes Britain Britain. It is not to speed up trials. If it was that, there'd be an argument to be made. It is not. It is simply to demoralise the British people, to bring more control from above. And it is a socialist, a red-green axis agenda to try and remove anything that makes Britain great, because that great part of Great Britain was removed a long time ago during a Conservative government, never mind this Labour government we currently have.
And let's go to this. I know this is over in Ireland, but I know you're going to want to comment on it because, again, free speech. This teacher, Enoch Burke, basically now given a life sentence because he refuses to use the pronouns of an LGBTQ student.
This is Enoch Burke, the teacher who has refused to deny his Christian belief and bow to transgender ideology. We're here at the Four Courts again in Dublin, where Enoch's case was again before Mr. Justice Brian Cregan. And he had a number of matters to deal with today in relation to the case. But at the beginning, he said, if any member of the Burke family so much as speaks, they will be removed by Gardaí. So this is the situation we're in. Lies are being told from the bench. Enoch Burke, his name blackened, the Constitution set at naught, the law disregarded, and if a person so much as speaks a word, they will be removed by a battalion of Gardaí.
Judge Cregan today has given us a new version of the Constitution regarding religious freedom. He said if Enoch Burke practiced his Christian belief outside the gate, this would never have happened. He said it 3 times today. So he is telling us you can have your religious belief outside the gate. But you know, that's not what the Constitution tells us. It tells us that we have a constitutional right to the free practice and profession of our religious belief in our school, in our job, in our shop, wherever we are, not according to this perverted idea and judgment of Judge Cregan.
The judge brought up an article that he had read this morning on the Irish Independent by Shane Phelan. He began to quiz Enoch on the article. Strange, I must say. Enoch Burke brought that issue again, that there were lies in the judgment of Mr. Justice Brian Cregan from the 18th of November. Lies about that he was a baleful and malign presence at the school, that he was stalking the school, its teachers and pupils, and that the pupils and teachers of the school had indicated in their affidavits that Enoch Burke was a danger, a potential danger to them. Now these are baseless lies, and really we saw a judge caught out today, fumbling, talking over Enoch, cutting across him, saying, oh, that's not the word I used. I used a different definition of the word, saying that he used stalking in a figurative and metaphorical sense. This is outrageous behaviour. It's an outrageous abuse of power by a High Court judge designed to slander a young man who's standing for the Constitution, for his Christian beliefs. Now, at one point, it came out that the judge had omitted from his judgment key parts of evidence and had selectively used what the principal of the school had said about the situation. And the judge simply said to Enoch Burke, move on. And it's a sad day when serious matters like this are brought before our High Court and we're told to move on. And we had also the issue about the Supreme Court appeal leave application that Enoch is intending to file, and that's simply in relation to the shambles of what we've seen in these courts over the last 3 years. When this case came before the Court of Appeal the first day in March 2023, they said it had nothing to do with Enoch Burke's views or his objection to the principal's instruction. When it came to the Court of Appeal in summer this year, in July 2025, the Court of Appeal, considering the same question, came to an entirely different conclusion. They said that it was about the fact that Enoch had objected to the instruction. It was about his views, about his Christian beliefs. That was why he was being disciplined. And we can't have a situation like this where paid officers of the state, judges, are creating a shambolic situation for people like Enoch Burke, going in now to being forced into a disciplinary appeal panel meeting in the face of such a state of such confusion about the core issue, really. Why was he disciplined by Wilson's Hospital School? And we also had today that the judge said that he's not going to let Enoch out for Christmas or Easter.
Now, this is really a life sentence for my son by this judge. A life sentence for Enoch Burke. And let us remember, this Enoch Burke did not begin with Enoch Burke. This dispute began when the principal of the school demanded that he call a child by a new name and use the they pronoun. It did not begin with Enoch Burke. He was commanded to deny his Christian belief, to give up his conscience and agree with transgenderism. And today he's getting a life sentence because the courts have decided to agree with the school and lock him up in prison.
Enoch Burke there is just being packed back into the prison van, jailed after he refused to accept transgenderism. Stay strong, Enoch.
Wow. I mean, if this is the kind of thing going on now, can you imagine what is going to be in 5 years, 10 years? And I think, frankly, as much as I wish the Trump administration would get on course, on track on some key things, I thank God that we have the Trump administration right now. Because I am pretty confident if we were in a Harris administration with Tim Walz as the vice president, can you imagine what would be happening to us right now? So we have to remind ourselves, again, I know that sometimes on issues of policy, we disagree with the Trump administration, and we are very passionate about our specific areas of which I think we're correct. But I still have to thank the Lord for what we have, the reprieve, because again, I think we would find ourselves very quickly, and I think we will find ourselves very quickly when the Democrats take over, the Marxists take over, we're going to find ourselves in this situation as well. Can you imagine what it's going to be like in the tribulation, folks, if this is what it's like now? Because you won't use the pronoun of an LGBTQ student when he's teaching at a Christian school. And again, so much for it being a Christian school. Why would you even bother calling yourself a Christian school? Number one. Number two, again, what about the conscience of Enoch Burke? To say, I'm sorry, you can play that game if you want. You can have your mental problem, whatever it is, your spiritual mental problem, whatever it is. I'm not playing along with that. And this is what's going on. And this is what's coming to America. And don't think for 1 minute that Islam, listen, folks, what I'm telling you. Don't think for 1 minute that Islam isn't being used as the battering ram to break down the law of our country, the constitutional republic, and to prepare the way for this very sort of thing. Joining me now is a very esteemed panel. We'll get them all back here. Bill Federer, we're adding in Shahram Hadian, Annie Cyrus, and of course, Peter McIlvena from the UK. Peter, I want to go to you first on this because this is right in your neighborhood. Tell me about this.
So, I was talking about this earlier this morning on a show, and this has been going on for over 3 years because he refused to use the they, them pronoun of someone who obviously has issues, but we now term them as transgender, even though they need actually help and to talk through those issues. We are not, actually legally, we are not even allowed. So even if you're a psychiatrist, you're not allowed to talk through someone's issues. You must accept the madness of what it is. You cannot offer help and therapy in any way. Even if you're a Christian therapist, you have to accept what they say, and you cannot talk through. And we are in a very different situation. It used to be, 10 years ago, you used to be able to talk through and say, actually, let's talk about, there obviously are some issues happening. Let's help you through this current situation. Now we accept the chaotic situation of this individual and subject them and sentence them to a life in torment and torture instead of helping them. And the teacher, Burke, obviously did not want to help. And he has been such a high profile individual to try and bring help. Now he has been sacked as a teacher, but still he keeps going back to the school, which is why he is continually arrested. So although I maybe have issues on the way he is doing it, because he no longer works there, has been sacked, yet we all need an issue that we will fight for, and possibly we need an issue that we will die on. And he, as a Christian, has said, God has made man has tried to make man in his image, but God has made man in his image as male and female. You just go back to Genesis 1, and that's how the world works. So you take God's design for life, then you will live according to that. You tear that up and you go through the Tower of Babel and you decide you can turn man into your own image and recreate him, then you've got the utter chaos that we find themselves in. He is not willing to accept that as a strong Christian, very strong Roman Catholic, and he has stood by that principle, and because of that, the state are after him. But again, Brannon, thank God for the Trump administration and thank God for social media in terms of Elon Musk, what he's doing in shining a light. And there's been such focus worldwide on this. So I think the Irish government at some point have to back out of this. They need a way to back out of this, because if they don't, they will demonize every single Christian in Ireland that stands up and says, God made us male and female. That's his design for humanity, and we need to accept that. Yet you see the collapse of the church in Ireland. The Catholic Church is nowhere to be seen. We have Ireland as probably the worst example of how socialism can come in and destroy a nation. Ireland I grew up in Ireland, in the Republic of Ireland, in Dublin in the 80s, and it was one of the strongest Catholic countries in Europe, one of the strongest Christian countries in terms of ethos and values. It is now probably the most liberal country in Europe. It's been turned completely upside down.
And how did they do that? How did they do that? Through the educational system? Through the media?
Oh, they did it through accusing the Catholic Church of sex crimes and then saying this is Christianity. So they took some vicars, they took some churches that there were awful instances of abuse to children, and then they extrapolate that out and they say we're going to demonize the whole church. It is evil, it is awful, and we are going to destroy the church. And whenever you put out child abuse, unless you're in the UK and it's the grooming gangs, the Muslim rape gangs, that's acceptable in the UK. But actually, abuse by Catholic priests is not acceptable. None of it is acceptable. But the issue is, in terms of the Catholic Church, it was not to do with Christian teaching. Nothing in the Bible promotes that at all. Nothing. Where in Islam it does promote it. And the problem was that the state took this as a way of attacking the church and kicking the church. And because of that, the power of the media and the power of the political state were able to destroy the church and remove its position in Ireland from a position of absolute power, not in a negative way. Absolute influence is maybe the better word to use, to utter devoid of any connection in society. And that has happened through not only the attack from the media and the political system and the judicial system, but also through mass immigration from Islamic countries that have completely changed Ireland beyond all recognition to what I remember growing up there in the 80s.
Wow. And wow, there's so much there. I want to bring in our other panel, but first, one more clip. Here's a guy, I guess a guy in the UK, and we're talking about this, folks, because this is coming to America, okay? This is the Great Reset. This is the globalism. This is what they want to put us all under. And the Biden administration was already trying to set this up. Remember the gal they brought in that was singing the Mary Poppins songs and everything? This is the gal they were trying to put in power to be some kind of speech czar, I think, to do this very thing here. So again, this is a warning to Americans. What's happening in the UK is the model for the whole world. This is the model of the global elite, the World Economic Forum, etc. I guess I don't know why they're saying that Enoch is getting a life sentence. I want you to comment on that very, very quickly. Why did they say a life sentence, number one? And number two, I know he was fired, but was he just going back to the gates of the school? I mean, he wasn't trespassing onto the property, right?
He was going back to the gates of the school, and they say that actually he's not welcome, that he was trespassing. That's what they say. And
how's he trespassing if he's outside the gates?
I don't know the exact line he crossed in terms of standing on territory, but I do know that it's irrelevant because the state want to make him a martyr on this, and a lifetime because he can no longer teach in Ireland. He has lost his profession, so he has to retrain and do something completely different. He's been demonized. He can't just go and get a job somewhere in Ireland because the state have made sure his name is blackened in such a way.
When will he get out of prison?
Persona non grata.
When will he get out of prison?
Oh, so he has been arrested, released. It is utter harassment by the state. They will not leave him alone.
Is he still in prison right now?
I believe he's in prison. Yes, I believe he's in prison all the way through for Christmas. I haven't looked closely at what has happened because this has just happened. But the state have done this time and time again for the last I think in September 2022 it first happened.
Wow.
So it's been over 3 years. They will not let up. They want to demonize him. They want to make him an example. And they want to make sure that no Christian stands up for gender, for family values, for truth.
Okay, well, I want to ask Bill Federer, then we're going to bring Shram in here as well. I want to ask Bill Federer and Annie. I want to bring Bill Federer in just one moment and ask him about William Blackstone, and because we saw Tommy Robinson quoting him earlier, and ask him about we need modern day Oliver Cromwells. I want to ask him about those two folks here in just 1 second. But I think a guy just got a sentence in the UK of 20 years for posting something on social media. Watch this, guys. Here we go.
Your sentence is unavoidable.
Oh, it's going to spin on us, is it?
Please. The sentence that I pass has been reduced by 1/3 to reflect your guilty plea. The sentence is one of 20 months imprisonment.
Oh, 20 months. All right, 20 months.
You will serve up to 1/2 of your sentence in custody before you are released on license. If you fail to abide by the conditions of your license, you can be returned to prison to serve some or all of the remainder of the custodial term. The victim surcharge will apply, and I will make a collection order.
Okay, so I don't know what he posted. I don't know if you're aware of this, but apparently this man was sentenced to 20 months in prison for a social media post. Do you know what he said on the social media at all? You know this case, Peter?
Nobody probably said Happy Christmas or something. I don't know. Look, we have moved along any form of common sense thinking to anything you say which is deemed as offensive. And offensive means anything which anyone at some point, anywhere, has found offensive. That then is breaking that law, and you can be arrested. So 70 million people in the UK, 7 million people in the world. Hey, someone will find offense, Brandon.
And the numbers of people that have been arrested in the UK for free
speech. 30 a day. 30 a day we are having arrested. That was a article, New York Times, I think in August this year. So we're having 30 people a day arrested.
Gosh. All right, Bill, very quickly. We need we need William Blackstones. We need Oliver Cromwells. Speak to these two men that we need who came out of that part of the world.
Yeah, William Blackstone commentaries on English law said, better 10 guilty go free than one innocent person be put in prison. So you err on the side of innocence. You know, the king, you had Henry VIII, you had an Archbishop William Laud, L-A-U-D, and there were people that were saying stuff that were not in agreement with the state church, and they were arrested, and there was a backlog. And so they decided to cut through the backlog by creating the Star Chamber. It was a government room with stars on the ceiling. And you could not have an attorney by your side. You could not have witnesses. You couldn't meet the accuser. It was just random accusations that somebody thought that you said something that was not in agreement with the government. And when the people wouldn't confess, they would put him in prison for contempt. And if they confessed, they would put him in prison for the crime. So you could put in prison either way. They didn't feed you in the prison. They would twist your arm and brand you on the face as a heretic with the letters SL for seditious libel, cut off your ears. And someone who had a private little Bible study, his name was John Bunyan, and they were saying unauthorized prayers, right? You couldn't make up your own prayers. If you felt like praying, you had to open up the Book of Common Prayer and read the prayer. And so here's John Bunyan. They raid his little prayer meeting. and they put him in jail for 12 years. That's when he wrote Pilgrim's Progress. And so then they passed the Conventicle Act, which outlaws small group meetings because they were called conventicles. And then even during, you had the killing time in England. So the people said, you know what, we don't want to use that English Book of Common Prayer, so let's meet in a field. The government sent its police into the field to arrest them and kill them. And so then you have William Penn, and he is a Quaker, and the government outlawed Quaker meeting houses. And so he and William Meade are in Grace Chapel Street, Grace Church Street, and they find that their Quaker meeting house is padlocked, and so they end up preaching in the street. And the government comes and arrests them for saying unauthorized things and puts them in jail. And it's called Bushell's case. One of the jurors was named Bushell. And the judge was upset because the jury found William Penn innocent. And so the judge put the entire jury in prison and says, you're not going to come out until you find William Penn with a guilty verdict. And William Penn, yells out as they're dragging him away, don't forget that you're Englishmen and you have rights. And the Bushell guy says, nor shall we forget, And so because of that, America's founders put in place the Fifth Amendment. So you cannot be forced to testify against yourself. And then the Sixth, then you right to a trial by a jury of your peers. And so several of the founding fathers said the trial by jury was the most important right in America. One of the big issues at the time of the founding was who paid the judges. You would have thought, oh, well, let the king pay. It's one less thing for us to worry about. No, they knew that your loyalty went with your paycheck. And so in America, the judges were paid by Americans. But the King of England insisted on paying the judges because he knew that they would want to keep their job and they would never give a decision different than the government wanted because they would lose their job. And so the founders realized that there was no justice. And it's one of the reasons that Thomas Jefferson listed in the Declaration of Independence that caused us to want to break away from England. And but it's ironic that these same things are happening today in the country of England.
And look at this headline. Britain is halfway into the Great Reset. Here's the proof. It's an article we'll get into a little bit later, maybe. But I think this is all a part of the Great Reset. Would you agree with that, Shahram, that what we're seeing, America is getting a little taste of what the Great Reset, the World Economic Forum, and all these things are really, America is getting to watch it by just watching the UK. But you know what drives me crazy, so try not to gaslight me, is all the stupid Southern men down here. And I can't speak to up north because I don't live up there. But I do know that when we go hold a conference up there, we pack them in, 1,000 people at the Expo Center in April. You bring in the National Worldview Weekend here with major speakers, and the gene pool down here is so shallow, they can't understand what you're saying, half of them, right? And I'm sorry, I'm a Southerner, born and raised a lot of my life in the South now, or living here, born in Jackson, Mississippi. Family's been here, take you to the family graveyard back to the Civil War. But I'm sorry, a lot of people here have turned into Floyd the Barber off Andy Griffin. They're nice people, but they're not real bright. And it's unfortunate. I don't know what has happened to the South, but if you want to have people that can keep up with you, understand what you have to say, and want to hear it, you better go up to the Midwest, not down here to the Bible Belt, where there's very little Bible under our belt. There's a lot of cultural Christianity, but it's not real Christianity. So if you think the South is going to rise again, think again. Most of the men down here are ruled by their wives that all belong to these silly little clubs. What's those stupid little clubs those Southern women belong to? What's that little club they all belong to, Logan? Ask your mother. She'll know the club. They belong to these silly little Southern women clubs. They get around and chit-chat and act all uppity and like they got money when most of them are broke in 6 months from losing their house, because I know some of these people. But they all act like they're rich and well-to-do, but most of them are broke, So it's all largely down here where I live. It's all, and maybe it's not where you guys live in the South, but where I live is at least apparently, they try to appear very fluent. I know a guy is a pastor. He said, this is the hardest area I've ever pastored in my entire life because there's so much affluence. They have so much affluence in need of nothing. So if you're waiting on the South to rise again, folks, it ain't happening. The men are completely neutered, most of them. Not all of them, but the majority. You know that. You moved to Knoxville and found out this yourself. But speak to this. Is this not part of the Great Reset? And the point I was making is we've got a chance to see what's going to come and happen to us if we could get the men of the country and the pastors to wake up and see it. But most Americans have no clue what we're sitting here talking about right now. And we're being like Paul Revere, the Great Reset is coming. The Great Reset is coming. And then when it happens, they'll be crying and belly aching about, well, if we'd only known. Jerome, I gave you a lot. Go.
Well, yeah, it's a lot there. Let me start with, you said at the end, the pastors. What we are lacking is pastors like the revolutionary pastors, the Black Robe Regiment. We're lacking courage from the pulpits. We're lacking courage from our pastors. So when you have effeminate or neutered pastors, in my opinion, they're spiritual eunuchs. That leads to effeminate or spiritually weak men not leading their families, not standing up when they see evil coming in, not being able to withstand. We saw this, of course, during COVID, where the Great Reset was actually, exposed, put out there. Now, all of a sudden, people are using this term, the Great Reset. Where did this come from? Well, they've been working on it, obviously, for decades. And part of the Great Reset, Brandon, if you remember, Agenda 2030, part of that goal is what they called the migration replacement. So you have a weak populace, a populace within 8 Western nations, including the United States, that have extremely low birth rate. So now the globalists decide we're going to mass migrate virile men, i.e. from the Middle East, from North Africa, Muslims, the majority, into these cultures to become a workforce. That is one of the reasons why I believe they're turning a blind eye to the rape culture that is in Western Europe, in the UK especially. And at the same time, as the previous guest mentioned, you have the decimation of the church. You have the infiltration of the church. So all of that is part of this perfect storm that the Great Reset, the globalists are moving. And you said it earlier, at the center of the globalist foot soldiers, at the center of their agenda for that migration replacement is Islam. They are allowing Islam to take a foothold. By the way, you think in Ireland, when the Muslims are governing, you think the Muslims are going to be allowing transgender terms? Is that what happens when the Muslims get the upper house? Just like we're seeing in America, right? Where on the lower house, Dar al-Harb, the Muslims will placate to the left, to the LGBT, to all of this wokeism, again, that we see in our churches. But when they get to the upper house, the Dar al-Islam, the house of the surrendered one, what do? They all of a sudden turn on the LGBT. They turn on the trans. They don't play that game anymore because now they have to follow the strict interpretation of Islam. But Agenda 2030, the Great Reset, all of this is exactly playing out. Islam is at the center of it. Islam is being used to be the battering ram, destroy these cultures, and the Western European governments that are protecting Islam and jailing people for, quote, Islamophobia or now transophobia are very soon. That's what they're going to be doing here as well. And you're right, the South is not going to rise. I've seen it here. The absolute apathy, the absolute so-called religious spirit where everybody thinks they're a Christian, but nobody has the guts and the courage to actually stand up against the evil that is coming in and against these Muslims that are going to be coming over here, these refugees that are going to be coming over here and subjugating us and trying to kill us.
And why do you think that is? I think it's the influence of Freemasonry, which is so prominent here in the South. Freemasonry combined with I guess they've bought into a form of Christianity, a Southern Christian culture that says you have to be nice, And of course, the word nice is actually derived from the word ignorant, but that somehow you got to be nice. And speaking too much truth is not being nice, which is really kind of ironic because you run into a lot of people here in the South that, particularly women, that have no problem speaking their mind. I mean, you want to watch a show that's gives you off a Southern flair of some of the ladies down here some of them are kind of funny actually to be around. Go watch Steel Magnolias with Julia Roberts and the New Age woman. What was her name? The New Ager.
I know who you're talking about.
Shirley MacLaine.
Shirley MacLaine. Yeah,
Shirley MacLaine.
She plays Weezer. Okay, she plays Weezer. It's a hilarious character. I know women like that here in the South, and they have no problem telling you what they think. But when it comes to speaking truth about so many of these other issues, they don't want to do it too publicly, right? Because we got to be nice. And I don't know if it's that, or if it's. I don't know, is it the British influence of the colonies that originally founded us, that heritage keeps going? I don't know. Why is it you think the folks in the South, or in certain parts of the South, Bill, from a historian standpoint, are so reluctant to speak up, yet you go up north and you find far more active Christians, Christian organizations, publishing houses, schools, broadcast networks? Why is that more up north? I mean, you know it. You go up to Milwaukee, you pack them in. You come down to Memphis, you'll be lucky if you have anybody show up, Bill.
Yeah, I put together a book on socialism, and I go through the tactic of marketing. And in the 1800s, it was Sears catalog, Wells Fargo wagon. 1900s, it's magazine ads, and a guy named Edward Bernays, the nephew of Sigmund Freud, and he realized that we are social creatures, and we will buy products if we see other people using the products. They did a cartoon called Keeping Up with the Joneses. And so he says women go into a department store and think they're picking out shoes. They're not. The marketing executive picked out the shoes for them, paid the actors to put them on, paid the photographer to take the pictures, paid the magazine to print it. And the women see it. And when he goes this way, they're controlled. He goes in the same way. You use marketing of products to marketing of ideologies. You make it look like everybody's holding a particular view, and people will feel a subconscious pressure to adopt those views. It's like, and so somebody that read Edward Bernays was Joseph Goebbels over in Germany. And he realized, hey, people will do what they see other people doing. So he would orchestrate these big Coliseum events with 100,000 people, and they'd begin to give the Hitler salute in the front. And it would work its way back like a wave at a football game, and you would see it getting closer to you, and you'd feel pressure to give it, and somebody would see you giving it, and then they'd feel pressure to give it, and everybody leave the stadium thinking, well, I guess everybody's in on this Nazi stuff because I all saw them giving the Hitler salute. It was a manipulation of your perception. And people, little kids, want to wear the right tennis shoes in school. They want to be invited to the parties. They don't want to be left off the team. And so now they control the media. They control the narrative. And people want to be accepted and they don't want to be rejected. And so there's a saying called spiral of silence. People will self-censor their views if they think they're in the minority. And of course, Peter's with a group around a fire, and a girl gets in his face and says, "You were with Jesus." And you can just picture Peter looking around the fire. Everybody's eyeing him, and he realizes he's about to get kicked out of the group, and he denies Christ. And so there is a real fear of being kicked out of a group. And of course, after the resurrection, the Sanhedrin tells Peter, stop speaking in that name. And Peter said, we must obey God rather than men. It's like, what happened to Peter? He's filled with the Holy Spirit. Something about having a relationship with the Lord that you don't care about what other people say about you. And that frees you up. But if you don't have that relationship, your worth is dependent on your being accepted or rejected by a group. And
I think you just nailed it. I think you just nailed the answer. There's a lot of people up north. There's a larger percentage of true, God has to be the judge of this, not me. But I think from the fruit, there seems to be an indication there are more Christians living, real, actual Christians, or should we say real Christians that are not just justified, but are being sanctified with ongoing faithfulness and obedience. There seems to be more mature, spiritually, biblically trained, whether by themselves or their radio networks they listen to, their TV stations they listen to, the groups, whatever. There's more biblically discerning and trained and mature Christians, I believe, living in the Midwest and living on places like the East Coast than there are in the Bible Belt. There are a lot of self-described Christians in the Bible Belt, but I think when the rapture happens, there are going to be a lot of people in the South that are left behind. Now, there may be some who get out, and we see this in the New Testament. They're saved, but their works are burned up, because they're made of wood and hay and stubble. But they get in smelling like fire, but they make it because your salvation is not based on works. Just your rewards at the Bema seat are for that. So I think maybe it's the issue of persecution that up north certainly on the West Coast, on the East Coast and the Midwest, it costs you to be a Christian. You have to know what you believe and why you believe it. You got to be ready to defend it. You have to have an answer. And down here where I live, it's a Christian culture, and there's a lot of Christianity in the culture, but not a lot of biblical discernment, not a lot of biblical knowledge. You go out on the street, and if you were to ask the average, and even if they come out of the average Southern Baptist church down here, and you ask them too many Bible questions, they're not going to have an answer for you, because there's just not a lot of really committed biblical Christians here. It's Christian friendly, but it's not Christian literate, biblical literate. Would you agree with that, having now experienced living in Knoxville, Jerome? And of course, you're also someone that's travels all over the country and can take the temperature of the population of the nation, as we've done for 36 years next year. So we've experienced this firsthand. If you want to bring out a crowd and say, hey, we're having a biblical worldview weekend, and you want to have an actual good turnout, it was never the Bible Belt. It was always Minneapolis, Milwaukee, anywhere on the East Coast. Anywhere on the East Coast, we did well. You had to go to areas where people are like, why are you going there? Why don't you go to Charlotte, North Carolina, or Louisville, Kentucky? And we would say, because they're asleep. You got to go to where the people are being persecuted or at least challenged in their faith. And people were shocked when we would tell them the size of the crowds we would get in those markets, because they assumed those are the markets you don't want to go to. You want to go down to the Bible Belt. Now, I interrupt to say that because you know this as a speaker, and you've lived around the country like I have to see it. And the reason it frustrates me is I think a lot of people are waiting on the MAGA red states to rise, and they're not going to, not from the churches, not from the Christians.
Yeah, absolutely. I just... this week, I just did a show on my Rumble channel that was called The Red State Mirage. This idea that because we're in, a very conservative state here in Tennessee, politically speaking, as far as the percentage of Republicans, or that you're in the, quote, buckle of the Bible. I always joke with people here. I'm like, if this is the buckle of the Bible Belt, our pants are down around our ankles. But we better pull up our pants like big boys and buckle up, because we have no idea what's happening. This fallacy, this mirage that we're in some sort of a conservative bubble. The battle is everywhere. And you said it, Brandon. Why is in Iran, my birth country, Annie's birth country, why is Iran, numerically speaking, the fastest growing Christian church on the planet? The number one singular reason is persecution. Because persecution over the last 47 years has done, that the enemy has brought, God has used it to truly test the true believers, the true faith, the true church. It has happened for 2,000 years of church history. The church was born into persecution, and immediately it tells you who's who. And I agree with you. There's a lot of carnal Christians that are probably going to get into heaven, but they're not going to be commended on their works. And meanwhile, while we're here on this earth, waiting for the Lord to return for his church, we got to still resist evil. We're part of the restrainer. The Holy Spirit's in us. We're supposed to restrain the works of darkness, expose it. So you're absolutely right. Persecution is what, and like you said, okay, the American church, maybe they're not going through full-blown persecution yet, although we saw a little bit of that during COVID. But we are certainly in those areas. When I lived in Washington State, you are challenged daily because of your faith, where you work, how you live, the types of situations like you're bringing up Enoch Burke, where, I was reprimanded so many times before, because most of my ministry time, I've been bivocational. So I can't tell you how many times when I was a police officer, when I was a coach, I'd be reprimanded for my faith. Because if I talk about my faith, they'd reprimand me. Now, that wouldn't stop me, because I'm not going to shut up about talking about Jesus Christ. But that tests you, right? That challenges you. That burns away the dross, right? That burns away all of the impurities of your faith and causes you, and the Southern Christian, the Bible Belt Christian, doesn't have that yet. They're too comfortable. But listen, you said it earlier, what's in Western Europe is coming to a neighborhood close to us very soon. So the time of reckoning is coming for the American Christian to decide. And by the way, the American pastor, oh, woe to you pastors out there that think you can take a neutral position on these issues, and that God's not going to hold you to account as a shepherd of the church. Now, there's a bunch of them, Brandon, that are hirelings.
Oh, yeah.
There's a bunch of them that are hirelings. But those true shepherds that are trying to ride the fence, oh boy, we better wake up now and understand.
Down here in the South, a lot of them ride the fence because if they say too much, they lose their job because their board of deacons is a bunch of Masons. Okay? I know a Southern Baptist church where I said to the pastor, why don't you ask some of your deacons if they're Masons, and if they are, to resign as Masons or get off the church board? Because I think the reason your church is being held back in growth, and you're really frustrated because you're laboring and you're not seeing the growth and the spiritual fruit, is because you got a board of guys that have opened their shirt, bowed their knee, put on a blindfold, and kneel before the worshipful master and said they're lost in darkness and need the light of Freemasonry to save them. And I said, until you get those people out of your fellowship and out of your leadership, God is not going to bless what you're doing. And he said, no, I won't ask them that. And I found out later from what I was told and from the research I did, is one of the guys that was on the pulpit committee that hired him was a Mason. So a lot of these guys are beholding to a club, and they try to recruit the police officers, the judges. They permeate the culture here in the South, the Masons, the Freemasons. And people that know what I'm talking about know what I'm talking about. But this is one reason why our churches in America, and Ron Carlson, who wrote the book Fast Facts on False Teaching, he used to tell me where he would go into these churches in the South and the pastor would just get dressed down by deacons who are Masons. Like, why'd you bring this guy in? You're going to let him get up there and say this stuff? And Carlson would be like, I'm only quoting your own authorities, Albert Pike and your own authorities, for Pete's sake. And then after the presentation, he told stories like in Atlanta where a bunch of them regathered in the pastor's office, said, we can't deny anything you said. It's all factual what you said. We repent, we're resigning. And they actually went and got a sandblaster, water blaster, and blasted the Freemason logo off the foundation of the church. And Ron Carlson talked about how that church after that exploded with God's blessing and spiritual revival hit that church. And I stood next to him after our table was next to his at one of our Ozarks Worldview weekends, where he did a whole presentation on Freemasonry. And he was so loving about it and kind, but documented. And his table was right next to Melissa and I's, as we're obviously the organizers of it. And our wives were close friends. And so we always put our tables next to each other so they could visit. And I was at my table signing books, and he was at his table signing books after he spoke. And I watched three men independently of each other walk up to him, and two of them were in tears, thanking him, saying they did not fully understand what it was they were involved in, but now they do. And I'm going home to resign. And one man in tears said, I just had my two sons installed. And I'm going to go home and get my two sons and myself out of this lodge. And I think that's one of the things that's holding the church in the South back, is the spiritual, the real spiritual problem of Freemasonry. Bill, closing comments from you before we let you go, and then we'll turn to Annie here as well.
Yeah, I was just wanted to share a couple quotes from some of the people that spoke on Islam. And I put together a presentation where I go through my book, but when you look at the everybody from Thomas Aquinas to John Wesley to John Calvin, they all are documenting the pattern of Islam coming in and then eradicating the previous culture. And so just an emphasis again on the immigrate, increase, eliminate, and how what the civilization goes in a life cycle. You have a birth of a civilization, and then it grows and it becomes flourishing, and then it begins to get old and rotten, and then it ends up collapsing with disease and so forth. And so there's an author named J.D. Unwin, 1934, wrote a book called Sex and Culture. But he said that civilizations go through 4 stages: a period of pain and poverty, where they go through war or famine, and then they work together, and then they become productive, and then they become patriotic, and then they become prosperous. And then they want to enjoy the prosperity, and they get promiscuous and indulgent and sexually liberal and enjoying all the pleasures of life. And then they get weakened and then get conquered by the next rising civilization. And so that's sort of what we've been seeing, that we've gone through times of struggle, we've worked hard, we've become productive, patriotic, but then we achieve prosperity and want to enjoy the pleasure-focused, and then sexual immorality, and now we're seeing us being inundated by other civilizations. So it's a time to repent, and I believe if we repent, God can turn things around in a second, and by his time. So on your phone, you can take the direct route, but if we repent, it can take the longer route and buy us some more time. But I want to thank you for having me on.
Thank you, Bill.
I'm impressed with Shahram Hadian and the other guests that you have, and just appreciate you, Brannon, and so much, and Logan as well.
Thank you, Bill. Bill Federer, AmericanMinute.com, AmericanMinute.com. Thank you, Bill.